Hezi 49, brought to you by basketballgods.net. It's your boy Alk, messing around on the mic. You know, I see everybody in the last 24 hours celebrating the verdict. I don't know, man. I try to stay out of these things. Just my initial quick thought is, what are we celebrating for? Like, this should have been a given, you know? And justice, what does the word justice mean, right? Well, it's like, it's just. It just should be, in my eyes. And I think the sad thing is that I think the results are probably out of fear of backlash rather than true justice. Let's keep it pushing. Let's get to basketball. Pelicans and Nets were the early game on TNT. It was announced that James Harden has had a setback with his hamstring injury, and he's now out indefinitely. I feel like I'm talking about hamstring injuries every week here. Durant obviously out now with the dead leg or the Charlie horse, whatever you want to call it. What came to my mind is, are these guys active enough? Specifically the big three in Durant, Harden, and Kyrie. We know they've taken time off for various reasons, COVID, just the amount of games they've played. I mean, I wouldn't have a hard time imagining that they kind of only play when they're in games. And I just don't know how much they're training, right? And sometimes rest isn't what's best. If your body and your posterior chain and stuff isn't activated, that's when you get these soft tissue injuries. So I don't know. At this point, it seems like a little more than just a coincidence that they keep getting nicked up. Maybe they're just not as active as they need to be. That was my thoughts on it. And, you know, as much shade or salt as I've thrown at this new big three, and I've had fun with it, I want to see them all healthy. I don't want to be sitting here come playoff time talking about what if. I want to see what could be. So it was a Kyrie-led Nets team yesterday against this Pelicans team that's, I don't know, are they the most disappointing team in the league? I guess that's subjective. It really depends on what your expectations were for them going into the season. And to be fair, they were all over the map with a lot of people, you know, going into it. Some people had them here. Some people had them much higher. I think their ceiling, we all acknowledged, was high given the talent on this roster, albeit very young. But it seems like, to me, Stan Van Gundy's going to get the one-and-done treatment here, right? Because clearly the roster isn't for him, so why waste time? You know, I know a lot of people are going to say, you can't just give a guy 1 year. You got to give him a few seasons to establish himself. Do you really? In the NBA, where you kind of know the foundational core of this team, Ingram, Zion, apparently not Lonzo, right? But it's like, why waste time? It doesn't work. And what I see is there's just a disconnect. And they showed him mic'd up last night, right? And he's preaching, transition. We got to get back in transition. And, you know, typical coach stuff. But what he's missing is that veteran that's backing up his message. The vet that's reiterating what he wants to do and kind of co-signing him as a coach. Bledsoe ain't it. Adams is a mute. I guess J.J. Redick was supposed to be that guy, but once he fell out of the rotation, he wasn't going to be that guy for Stan. And so there's no vet to bridge the gap between these young guys and Stan Van Gundy, no assistant coach, and it just doesn't seem like it's going to work, man. You know who I would love to have seen with this roster is Monty Williams. He seems like perfect coach for a roster like this because he's young enough to relate. He's a brother. I'm going to keep it honest. I think that matters in today's NBA to these young dudes. But he's stern. He's not too soft with them. And you're seeing what a job he's doing in there in Phoenix. You also have to acknowledge Phoenix does have a much better mix of veterans when you consider Chris Paul, Jay Crowder. And, I mean, I guess those are their two vets, right? But, you know, I just think that they need a Monty Williams type in there. And I can't believe I'm going to find myself bringing this guy's name up again and endorsing him for a coaching job because I swore I never would. But how about Mark Jackson? I brought him up with Boston a few weeks ago. And, you know, there's just different rosters, different windows and situations for different coaches, right? We've talked about it before. Are you a Larry Brown type coach that likes to build from the ground up and develops, but isn't necessarily good with star players? Or are you a Phil Jackson type of coach where you need the stars? That's your specialty. It's handling the stars and the talent. And there's the coaches, the Brad Stevens, the Eric Spoelstras, the X's and O's guys. And there's always a balance. Not every coach isn't just one of those, but they lean into one of those categories as their strength. And Stan Van Gundy, I'm not sure, outside of looking like Ron Jeremy, exactly what category he falls into. I guess on paper, he's a defensive-minded, kind of hard-nosed coach. But in order to be that, you kind of need some clout. And maybe coming off that run with Orlando and prime Dwight Howard, he would have had that clout. But to come into the league, 10 years removed from that, I think that clout has evaporated, and now he's dealing with the new generation of player where he's having a hard time gaining their ear, gaining their respect. But, it's not just all on Stan Van Gundy. Let's take a look at David Griffin and what he's done since he took over as the general manager. Is he the president as well for this New Orleans Pelicans team? You could make the argument he really had no choice in the two big moves, and that is drafting Zion 1. You got to do that. And then the AD trade, I guess you could give him credit for holding out and trying to play hardball with the Lakers. He did get quite the haul from the Lakers. But the moves that he kind of made on his own, he hires Stan Van Gundy. He trades Drew Holiday for Eric Bledsoe and some late first-round picks. He signs J.J. Redick, and he signs Steven Adams. And now we sit here April 21st. They're going to miss the play-in tourney by what seems like a wide margin. They're probably going to have to start over with a new coaching staff. Oh, yeah, and the second piece in that AD trade, Lonzo, apparently is just going to walk. So maybe it's David Griffin that we need to take a look at here as far as the disappointments of this young Pelicans team. Now, again, expectations. Are they supposed to be contenders right now? Absolutely not. But I thought at the very least they would be in the play-in game. And it looks like they're not even going to sniff it. We're talking 10th seed? You can't get the 10th seed? Too much talent on that roster for them not to be able to do that. But anyway, to the game, Lonzo's finally back. He had that hip injury. He looked pretty good last night. 15-4 on 6 of 11 shooting. And I'm just very curious to see how he finishes out this contract year here, because obviously you got to give him a few games to get right. He missed some significant time, so I'm not going to judge him his first few games back, but he's struggled. He struggled, right? You just wonder if he's going to regain that confidence and continue to build as an offensive player, because this season he took a step. I know everybody saw the three-point stats. Everybody loved to throw out, look how many more threes Lonzo has hit than X player, right? But I mean, ultimately the question with Lonzo is he going to become a legit starting floor general like we project his brother will become? Or is his paradigm stuck as a role player? And if I had to guess, personality-wise, it's because LeVar dominated him too much as a child. Being the oldest of the brothers, I'm willing to guess LeVar was toughest on Lonzo. And it's a fine line. It's a balancing act when you're coaching, you're raising, you're teaching, because you don't want to fill them with too much confidence where it's delusions of grandeur. But at the same time, if you tear them down and you're too hard on them, then they never get the confidence that you need them to have. And that's the biggest difference between Lonzo and LaMelo, right? It's confidence. It's swagger. Lonzo's never going to have that. We know that. But I still think there's a possibility that he can be a legit starting point guard. Or does he, again, fall back into kind of being that third guard for you? So we'll see how that plays out. It doesn't seem like it's going to play out in New Orleans. Saw Zion throwing Blake Griffin around last night. That shit looked nuts. It's so funny the way he moves people with seemingly no effort. You look at whoever he just blew through his face, and they kind of have this look of like, my God, I might as well just go down. I shouldn't put up resistance. And that's kind of what you see. There is none. I saw him go to the right hand late in the game. I think that's a very good sign, because the context matters, right? You're looking at a kid or a player and you're trying to see how they're doing with their counter moves, if they can attack to their weak side. It's one thing to do it in the second quarter in a 10-point game. It's another thing to do it in the final 2 minutes of a close game. That lets you know that they're building true confidence in a counter move, and that lets you know that he's truly getting comfortable using it. I know I give Kyrie a lot of grief. And looking at his frame right now and how skinny he is, my initial thought is like, can he hold up? Is he taking care of himself physically as an athlete? But it's been undeniable that he's playing with the most bounce I've ever seen. Have you been paying attention? Have you seen him? He's got some dunks off, some two-handed dunks. And he's bouncy. And so while I don't think it's impossible to be a vegan and a pro athlete, I think the diet has to be so precise. You're playing with fire. And it's not something that happens overnight. It's a long-term effect. And so, hell, I don't even know if Kyrie is still vegan, or if he is. I'm assuming he is. That's what his physique shows me. But again, the proof is in the pudding. And every time he's been on the floor this year, he's been explosive and he's been dominant. Have you noticed he's become a mid-range god? I mean, his go-to move now is the Kobe fade, is it not? Kyrie's signature go-to move, at least this season, he's got so many of them, right, is the Kobe fade. It's probably on purpose. It's probably homage. Now, he's going to get to it differently, right? He gets to it off the bounce. He doesn't have the size to catch it with his back to the basket in the spots. So he's going to face you up, obviously break you down off the dribble, get to his spot, but then ultimately, the shot itself, it's the Kobe fade. Late in this game, Steve Nash, unsurprisingly, took the modern approach to coaching, and he fouled up 3 with about 15 seconds to go. And the Pelicans, Brooklyn actually gave the Pels a shot. They missed some free throws there. Outlet pass down the sideline. Zion, could he get a 3 up? And Kyrie strips him, and that was all she wrote. And I'll leave you with this thought for Kyrie Irving, because I'm trying to show him some love. You know what I'm saying? I don't want to always be hating on him. Is he the most clutch player of this generation? And I understand that word can also be subjective. Now, some of the analytics crowd will go to what by definition is clutch. Baskets made with within a 4-point game with under 4 minutes to go. I'm not really necessarily talking about that. I'm just talking about clutch moments. Obviously, we can go to the shot. And then I just play over and over in my head. I don't know the numbers. I don't play them percentages. It's just down the stretch of games when I watch Kyrie in a big moment, it feels like he always comes up big. He's got to be up there. Someone else can throw out some names, but I think Kyrie, after you think about aesthetically the greatest handle of all time, I think the next thing that he may be remembered for is that true elite clutch gene. So the Pelicans fall to an undermanned Nets team. And like I said, with my referendum on this franchise, they're not even going to sniff a play-in game, and that's pathetic. In the late game, you saw a Dameless Portland team fall to a Kawhi-less Clipper team. I don't know how this has turned into coach talk here today, but it has. I've heard grumblings that Terry Stotts may be on the hot seat, but I've also heard pushback that others seem to think Stotts and Dame are connected, much like Steph and Kerr. And unless Dame green lights it, Stotts will be there. I don't know, man. It's tough because it's always somewhere in between usually, right? And it's tough to judge Stotts when you consider the injuries they've had over, it just seems like forever. Maybe you got to take a look at their staff. But then you look at the injuries and some of them are freak injuries. I don't know, man. It's tough to judge him again because they never seem to fully have their full roster. But at the same time, it is what it is. How many times can you keep running it back? And if Dame is in control like we believe he is, like most franchise players have a lot of say, it's kind of either got to be CJ or Stotts. One of them's got to go because they need to try a new approach. And that's not an indictment on what they've done. It's just not been good enough. And so whether it's moving CJ out for a bigger sidekick or moving Stotts out to bring in a new culture and new system, you can't just keep running it back. It's not good enough. We know that. Now, for the Clippers last night, we got more Vax P. He's keeping it rolling, 33-11, and we're waiting for playoff time. So we'll see. You know what I will say? Maybe I'm not watching enough of the Clippers. It seems unbelievable to me that they're the number one offense. and three-point shooting team. That's the stat that they kept touting during the game last night. And again, maybe I just don't watch them enough, but on paper, that just doesn't seem right. You look at their roster, you're like, wait, what? But I mean, I guess it does. They can play 5 out. They're all shooting the 3 ball well. I think Paul George deserves a lot of credit, for that offensive team rating. To be honest with you, Rondo's looked good. And so the Clippers, depending on how these final 15 shake out, I hadn't really considered it, but they could possibly somehow snatch that 1 spot. They're right there. They're only a couple back. I don't know how many games they have against Phoenix or Utah left. If they do, definitely checking for those. I'll leave you with this thought here. After Portland lost yesterday, the Warriors, I'm talking about the Warriors again, sit 3.5 games out of that 6th spot. Listen, man, if Steph's going to continue to do what he's doing these final, 15 games, and he lifts the Warriors up above the play-in tournament, why can't he win the MVP?
You better ask somebody.
And before you say it's impossible, I mean, have you seen the numbers he's putting up? Now, does anybody expect him to, average 40 the rest of the season? No. But I mean, if he finishes, with 35 points a game at this, 50, 40, 90, and this team keeps climbing up and they go on a run here, why not? Why not? Because I think that the difference is this is a weird season. This isn't a normal season. They're trying this play-in tournament. Injury after injury, the COVID, all this stuff. So perhaps the criteria will change ultimately. Maybe you don't have to be a top 3 team. Maybe you just got to avoid the play-in. Maybe his numbers are so godly it doesn't matter. I know a lot of Warrior fans like to focus on the slander and the hate that Steph receives. But in reality, I think for the people that matter, the voters, I think he gets a lot of love. And I think he's going to get more and more if this continues. And so, look, man, I've learned now here with Steph Curry to take impossible out of the vocabulary. And so, is it likely? No. But could it happen? It might. Maybe that's just me and my biased Warrior fandom. I don't know. This is the Hezi, brought to you by basketballgods.net. I'm out, y'all.